Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to the August 2018 episode of ShapingEDU Live, focused on connected education to the workforce of the future. I want to thank you all for joining us for what it's shaping up to be an illuminating event, pun very intended. It's always happy hour somewhere, and if you're on Central or Eastern US time, that time is now. So for all you dreamers, doers, and drivers, here's how today's event is going to go. Joining us are several panelists who have expertise in today's theme. In a moment, they will introduce themselves, and collectively they represent higher education, K-12, industry, and nonprofits. In just a moment, they'll be introducing themselves. And while the chat is available for free-flowing conversation, we also encourage you to tweet along with hashtag ShapingEDU. And as a practical matter, I'll ask everyone in the audience to keep themselves muted unless speaking to eliminate any transient noises. But before we dive in, I do have a big announcement. So please get those calendars out so you can officially save the date. The next ShapingEDU Unconference, a face-to-face event, will be taking place March 12th through 13th, 2019 in Tempe, Arizona. If you attended last year's event or registered for any ShapingEDU Live events, including this one, you'll receive updates via email and also on social media about registration and lodging as soon as all that information is available. Very exciting. So without further ado, let's get to meeting our panelists. I'm going to ask everyone to please briefly introduce who you are, where you're coming from, and your main connection to the theme of the event. So first up, we have Deepti Sawhney.
Hello.
Deepti?
Yeah, hi. Hello, everybody. I'm Deepti from India, presently in New Delhi. I have been an educator in my previous life. I have been in school, K-12, dealing with children from early years up to IB. I have supported children with extended essays in computer science. Right now, I'm running my own company. It's called Mahattattva, and we work in the K-12 space for school management. And we also are deeply into teacher professional development. Do a whole lot of work in the non-profit space. I organize a whole lot of design thinking workshops with children, and I have linked design thinking to social change. So this is a pan-India event wherein children are working with partner schools and they are making projects for the community change. So that's about from me.
Thanks so much, Deepti. I'm also going to turn it, next I'm going to turn it over to Yipeng Fu.
Hello everyone, this is Yipeng Fu, and thank you, Sam. And then so it's kind of like a great honor to join this conversation. And then so I currently kind of like the Learning Innovation Program Manager at Untitled-Madison, University of Wisconsin here. And then so I mainly kind of like working with the professional degree and also returning adult to helping them to advance their career in the past few years. And before I joined this current job, and as I working as an instructional designer at the Smith College of Business at Penn State, and then so which become the work campus program. We also serving for the working adult to helping them to boost their career to the next phase. And then Penn State is where I finished my PhD, and then I PhD kind of focusing on the workforce education, which is highly tied into today's thing. Is about kind of how we can help in our next generation or current workforce to helping them to become the robot proof for the next couple of years. So this is something I'm pretty interested in and want to hear from on the audience today. And then so looking forward to beginning with you.
So glad you're here. Next up, we have Emily Wray.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emily. I am a course director and an instructional designer at Full Sail University in Orlando, Florida, coming to you live from my living room currently. I wear many hats in the Media Communications Department, Bachelor of Science. My current professional focus is student portfolio development, and that's where I've been spending a lot of my time and attention over the past year. I'm sort of pinch hitting, if you will, tonight on the panel, just kind of stepping in, and just happy to be part of the conversation and offer what I can.
Great to have you up at bat, Emily. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Over to you, Jonathan.
Greetings, everyone. It's a good morning from me from where I am. Fantastic to be a part of this. My favorite thing is actually because I get to meet a whole bunch of extra like-minded people in the connecting education to workforce kind of space. My background really quickly, educator for 18 years. I've been a teacher and a trainer of teachers, but honestly, the challenge now around how much work needs to be done to properly connect education to where workforce needs to go is such that I've spent the last 2 years very much focused on that with Future We organization and trying to help people figure out how they can invent their own futures and their own jobs. So yeah, very much pleased to be part of this. Thanks, Sam.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I look forward to your perspective. And next we have Jake.
Thanks so much for having me, Sam. My name is Jake Hirsch-Allen, and I think in some ways when Sam was referring to industry, she was referring to me. I also teach at a university up in Canada in Hamilton called McMaster, where I teach global health advocacy and governance based on some old intellectual property law days. I founded the first software development boot camp in Canada, now in 5 cities across Canada. So I've worked sort of on the online part of education via LinkedIn. My current role is higher education lead for LinkedIn Learning up in Canada, as well as working with our data and government in a group called our Economic Graph Team, which is how we map the economy using arguably the largest data set of labor market information. That's me.
Thank you so much, Jake. So glad to have your perspective here. You also may notice, everyone, that there's just art magically appearing before you on the screen. That's because we are so lucky to be joined today by Karina Branson of Converse Sketch. Those of you who had the privilege of attending the inaugural ShapingEDU unconference in April 2018 got a chance to get to know her and see her work. But she will be live sketching this event. And I don't know if this is something easy or quick for you to do, but we'd love to see your face, Karina.
Yeah, can you see me?
Yes, welcome.
You'll see my forehead most of this, probably brows furrowed in concentration. I tip my screen flat so it's easier to draw. So you mostly will see just the top of my head, but I'm looking forward to sharing this and super appreciative to be here. So hi to everybody I got to meet at ASU, and hi to everybody I haven't yet met, and hopefully we'll cross paths soon.
Thank you so much, Karina. So not only will we have the recording of this event to disseminate, but her beautiful artwork is an artifact as well. So thank you so much to all the panelists. Thank you, Karina. I think we're ready to begin. I'm going to be asking a few questions of the panelists, but in the audience, be thinking of questions that you'd like to ask, and there will be plentiful opportunities for you to inquire, to share your inquiries with the panelists as well. So first things first, I know it seems like it might seem repetitive to define it, but I know it means different things to different people. So I'd like to hear from each of you. What does connecting education to the workforce of the future mean to you, and how are you currently addressing it in your role or environment?
Okay, I'll jump in, Sam, if that's cool. I guess I'm very much coming from the education world as far as the workforce, industry, business. That's a newer world for me personally, but I really, the fantastic thing for me, the way that you're trying to connect these two is that, no one sector alone, I think, is going to be able to solve the problems in this area. And it's only if we can actually start connecting them and working together. It's the idea of systems level thinking. And even when I talk to scientists here in Australia about solving big future problems like food shortages, that kind of thing, they admit to me that all of the solutions that individuals or small teams could have come up with that's already happened. And the only sort of way forward with really big problems is actually connecting across systems. So yeah, that perspective, having the, the more we can get industry and workforce and educators together. I know in education, we do lots of great little projects ourselves, and that's fantastic. But again, with that example of trying to solve bigger problems, we really need to start connecting a lot more if it's going to have the impact that's needed. Yeah.
I had 4 examples that I think complement that statement perfectly. I couldn't agree with it more. And they come from different periods and different perspectives of my life. So obviously with LinkedIn, as I mentioned earlier, our data is what's driving the content that was produced in sort of lynda.com studios. Now we are describing as LinkedIn Learning. But knowing what skills are in demand based on 580 million members and the largest database of jobs posted, et cetera, allows us to, in part, create content that responds to those workforce needs. So I think that's some of the LinkedIn data piece, but there are other aspects that don't relate to LinkedIn at all that I think are important. For instance, there's a small Canadian startup called Ripen that is allowing for more work-integrated learning. So I think they're spelled RIIPEN, and we partner with them in a bunch of different places so that faculty members can create projects, can sort of crowdsource projects with real-world employers so that their students can begin to get that experiential learning happening quite easily within class, making it easier for faculty members to incorporate work-integrated learning into their teaching. And then even things like Lighthouse Labs, the software development bootcamp that I founded, was a direct response to the fact that my co-founders and I ran a software development company and couldn't hire enough developers. It was pretty straightforward. We couldn't find them. And so we started training them. And then I think sort of the last example that I wanted to give actually relates to the word workforce, because my latest project in Canada is to begin bringing in the work of workforce development organizations to the world of higher ed. And I should sort of take ownership of that. That's been happening, I think, in community colleges around the world for a long time, where the colleges are playing a role with people who are on unemployment insurance or disability insurance, et cetera. But I think that link between those who are actively employed in the workforce, those who are working for workforce development organizations, and those who are teaching in higher education and other education institutions is a really important one.
I might just piggyback on that to say, like, my voice is representative of, that teacher in the classroom who are doing those insular projects within a curriculum or within a program. One of the things that we're doing is creating partnerships with industry. So through industry partnership programs, we have local businesses, nonprofits, and different organizations contact us with different types of projects or needs, and we have them connect with us in a way that our students would be working on something real world, and then the students approach it almost like an assignment, and so they kind of have to apply for it. They have to be approved for it based upon their own particular demonstrated skill set, and we found that that's been a nice extension of a way to connect the classroom to what's currently in demand in the industry.
Again, this is Zipang. I want to kind of get trying a little bit, and then similar to what Emily and also Jake talk about, kind of how to kind of get define what is in-demand skill and how we can fulfill from the educational side. And then, but on the other hand, kind of we are always kind of coming back to be asked by the student, or especially for the adult student, why I need to coming back to school, why not just going to some place to learn online, and then so why I need to complete probably kind of 100 credit and then to get a bachelor degree. And then so those things are helping us to start to think about, okay, so how we can help in the higher education program to be more aligned to the workforce need, and then but not losing those kind of like educational spirit, and then which is kind of helping them to become a kind of whole person in the next generation. And then so this is something kind of debating a lot in the higher education right now. And then but I think kind of the trend is kind of how we can having more communication and conversation among each stakeholder, like the government and also private sector and also higher education aligned. And then so to think about what is the next education should look like. Should that look like align with the workforce need or have something differently? And this is still a question mark for me. And so, but I think kind of this is the first first step is pretty important to how we can start to think about how we can align to the in-demand skill need and then closing the gap, and then which is the first step we are trying to do right now in higher education right now.
Excellent. Deepti, did you have anything to add to that? No worries, we will move on then. Okay, so this was a really great overview of the theme, and I'm just wondering, what are some of the biggest challenges that we're going to need to overcome in order to better connect education and the workforce to the future? What are the biggest challenges, the thorniest ones, even simple ones that that just haven't been solved yet?
I can start, and then so in higher education, the most difficult thing or first challenge is kind of the internal buy-in, and then so it's hard to kind of persuade or kind of to even suggest and kind of this new kind of a thought or philosophy to align the curriculum into the workforce need. And then so before and then so those all the curriculum curriculum committee, they are trained as a scholar, and then so they are not quite worry about whether those knowledge cannot transfer into the skill. And then so, but however, less is where the gap coming out in the past few years, and we found, and then some of our recent graduates, they are not quite able to find a job because they don't equate the essential skill to helping to find a job, even though they have the knowledge, they have the required knowledge, but they don't have a chance to show up or demonstrate those skill set in front of the employer. And then so internal buying, I would say this is the first challenge, I would say.
That's an important one. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can jump in there, Sam, what you're talking about there in terms of the buy-in, from the decision makers, or the important people who actually need to be doing the connecting. And for me, that there's a huge challenge there around what I call the storytelling. Actually, just how do you even explain some of this future stuff to people? And certainly, like my experience, but I'm sure it's the same for everybody, that we're all so busy in our day jobs. It's kind of like heads down, and especially in education with the amount of curriculum and assessment, etc. And it's the same across any industry, really. It's just human that you never get time to actually look very far into the future. So how are you even going to find that time to be connecting? So for all of us who are involved in this space and who maybe already realize how important it is, that storytelling of how we explain it to people, but in a way that they're going to understand. I mean, in some my work, we put together what's called the Future Readiness Framework. So it's a bunch of kind of big picture skills, and you can look at that, and then you can go, oh, this is where I'm up to on that journey. But I think that's a really big challenge, that idea of how do we even just get the concepts across to people. Yeah.
And I might just add with that, talking about the buy-in and, the challenge of breaking out of smaller systems into bigger spaces, just the time that takes in general, between like clearing the bureaucracy or any of the channels that you need to do to continue to innovate just beyond your own little world. I find that I have a lot of freedom and autonomy to use my classroom and my space as a lab or as an experiment to try new things all the time. But beyond my small little world, inside another small little world, the way that those ideas can scale, it's never given the time or the attention to really explore that.
Thank you, Emily. And I see that Deepti was raising her hand, but she had been on mute. So Deepti, if you're back on, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. So, in India, we have our own set of challenges. And I think the major challenges, there are not enough talented or professional development for teachers. So what is actually happening is that there's lack of teachers in one place, and at the same time, in some places there's lack of even infrastructure. So to get started to having such kind of a conversation, you need to have the basics right. So in most places, there is innovation, there is creativity happening, but the infrastructure is a major, major concern in most of our schools. So that's one. And I think when you talk about education and you talk about skills, what's really important first is to have accessibility to the masses. We have a huge population. And then, you know, getting to them is one thing, because you must have heard of Kerala recently. The entire state is inundated with water, and there's, you know, so people, when you talk about education, think about the basics first. So where is my food coming from, and where is my shelter? And then you start talking about education. So if you're living in a country, in a city like Delhi, you're pretty okay. But then you move 10, 15 kilometers from Delhi, there are different kinds of challenges. So most of the places in India, what's happening right now is that people are thinking of, you know, alternative sort of systems wherein innovation and creativity can happen. So I am part of a whole lot of groups wherein Professor Pant is one, Professor Manke, you know, people in the university are actually looking for out of school opportunities, platforms for children where they can come and, you know, showcase what they are thinking for the future. So we have opportunities. Like I said, the design thinking project is one such project wherein children are working with schools beyond the school walls and going and doing projects which doesn't necessarily need a school to be working for. So there are children who are looking at opportunities beyond school. And I think in a space like India, where everything, the policies are so rigid, it's important that people like us come ahead and do things which are beyond the school walls, because everything can't be sorted out in the school system. You need to have your own sort of niche and just go on with it. Just don't wait for policies to happen.
Well said, and thank you so much for bringing up really important issues of access and infrastructure. I think sometimes we take for granted, you know, some basic things that not everyone has, and that's really a foundational element of being able to connect education to the workforce of the future. So thank you for sharing.
I was thinking about the role of institutions, because I'm seeing even in the chat some questions around how educational institutions fit into this picture, where a lot of what we're talking about is very workforce focused, which isn't always the place that higher education wants to be at the center of. And I think from the perspective of LinkedIn, there is this idea that one can have blended learning, that one can really go back and forth between teaching some more technical skills online and then in person, really focusing on the human skills, or the soft skills, the creativity, the ability to work with others, which really does require that you are working with others to learn it. And so I find there's actually a great complementarity between open education resources, a variety of online resources, and the work that has to happen within an educational institution, whether that is the more fundamental human skills or even the sort of higher level learning to learn that might not be entirely teachable online.
Yeah, I like the idea. Sorry about that. I just kind of can help myself, but I like to kind of mention about kind of those partnership between and also the role for education should play. And then so last kind of trigger another kind of my memory about another challenge we are facing. So how frequent or when we should kind of align all our curriculum into the workforce need. And then so are we losing the core for the higher education, which you can kind of building those foundation knowledge, or should we totally flip it around, kind of turning every kind of curriculum into more workforce focus? And then so this is kind of huge debating right now, kind of even probably inside our kind of current institute, kind of how much we should kind of align with the workforce need, and how much we should keep inside as kind of how it, as a kind of educational provider into the public world. And then so this is kind of pretty good kind of conversation, and I want to hear about that from everyone.
That's great, and thanks for referencing the gig economy comment in the chat. How do you strike a balance? What do we keep the same, and what do we update? Because I think Jonathan noted this, you know, from the onset, you know, in his opening comments, you know, we are trying to prepare students so that when they get to the workforce, they're able to excel in it. But we're also trying to train students who can invent and shape the workforce of tomorrow. So, and really invent the skills that will be needed tomorrow. So how do we strike that balance?
I can jump in there again, Sam. I really sort of like to throw in the idea of a kind of a playful scenario, I guess. And we're sort of talking about creativity being a key, very, very key skill, creative problem solving. And I guess in my work, I've found a dramatic difference if you can get people into what I call, I guess, a playful mindset. Their creativity can really flow from there. And even in the chat comments, you know, there's sort of some questions about, especially in higher education, you know, why would someone choose to do a 4-year degree, and there's all the tuition fees and the time, et cetera, involved in that. And that could be, I mean, on one level, that sounds like a bit of a scary question, but I guess my challenge to people in higher ed would be, hey, why don't you actually run with that? Like, let's actually be optimistic and positive and go, well, as a playful, let's just treat that as a playful scenario. What would a uni have to offer that's better than someone actually taking their, you know, 80 grand and 4 years of effort and putting that into their own business? If a university was going to offer something that was way more attractive than that, well, you know, I wonder what that would actually be. And yeah, encourage people to enter into that space. You would know, Sam, because you helped me with the idea originally. In the work that I'm doing, we have a scenario called First on Mars, where we ask, what would the first school on Mars need to look like? Well, what would the first university on Mars need to look like? And that's an idea that I brainstormed with Sam a few years ago, and I've taken it and run with it. But that kind of challenge to people, yeah, put yourself into that playful scenario, and then you'll be able to go much, much further. And it links in, as I was saying, with that idea of creativity and creative problem solving.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was a wonderful conversation a few years ago over some beers in Australia. I'd be happy to do it again. Anyone else want to build on that idea or take it in a different direction?
Her hand up again. So Deepti, I'll give you a chance, and if not, I can jump in.
Go for it,
Deepti. I'll jump in.
You may be on Deepti, you may be on mute. So sorry.
No, so I think as a panel, could we just talk about what do you think is a successful model for that? I mean, what do you think would be the ideal situation? So we are talking about curriculum, giving them spaces, and talking about innovation and creativity. But if you really want to put it in paper in one line, what would it be, the ideal situation?
Anyone want to take that on? It's a great question.
I'll try. For me, I think the ideal scenario would be, very personalized, project-based learning with, a handful of mentors. Many times, like I will say to my students, most of everything that's part of this curriculum you could learn on your own or in YouTube. So what else are we doing here? What else are you getting out of this interaction with me, with each other, with even just being in the university environment? And so for me, that sort of connected learning looks very project-based with continuity of relationships with a mentor over time.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that's like superbly similar to what we are trying to do as well. We have children in the Innovation Center where it's absolutely project-based learning. And what we're doing for them is we are getting them finances, and children before they get out of school they have their prototype and their product ready. So we already have that example wherein the children at school are creating stuff. Go on then, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic.
Great. And then so this is Yipang again. And so I think I would probably come at the thing back to come at the question we just talked about, it's kind of like starting to let me think about kind of like can we in the past, and we don't provide students too much option or kind of choices when they're pursuing their kind of training and education. But with those kind of connected kind of learning, and then so cooperation between kind of higher education and also the industry need, and then so it's kind of opened up a door for students kind of. If some students they want to pursue kind of some different career path, and so right now they can have more chance to meet more people, and then so having more way to engage with the kind of industry need, and also kind of not losing those kind of those structured kind of curriculum which is planned probably decades ago, and then so kind of like we kind of starting to enable kind of empower students more about so what is the thing they can pursue, and then so but on the other hand kind of how we can providing a role kind of how we can guiding them to making the proper or kind of a smart decision, helping to advance, and so that's that's another kind of challenge. And when we open the door for the future, and so have more content, more knowledge, and then more way to learn, and so but how we can help them to making those decisions better.
Thank you so much. And I just want to surface some really interesting conversations happening in the chat around all this. Tanya raised a really good point about our capacity for training faculty to design this sort of curriculum and, in K-12, preparing teachers to address it in primary and secondary education. Do you guys have any thoughts or recommendations on how we best prepare our faculty, our teachers, our educators, really the gatekeepers, who will connect these dots with students? How do we better prepare them?
One thing I've been thinking about, and Deepti's question got me on this track, and I love panels where I'm having to think about new things. So I thank you to all of you for spurring my imagination. But in particular, I was thinking about education as a protected environment. So one of the things that we have to teach faculty to do is to create the space for students to learn and explore in ways that they might not be able to in the quote unquote real world. And then I was thinking about how different that vision is from the vision of a technical or a career college, where or even the vision of work integrated learning and experiential learning and project-based learning, where really you're trying to do the opposite, right? You're trying to expose them to that real world. You're trying to teach teachers to demonstrate to their students or provide students with the link to the workforce. And those seem like almost diametrically opposed visions, which is why I was really struggling to answer Deepti's question, and also why I think it's probably challenging for us to teach teachers how to teach both things. So I'm wondering whether it's possible, like, how do we reconcile those different visions of education?
Yeah, I can try a little bit. And so right now we're working with one of the faculty kind of starting to have one project, and it's really tying back to what Tanya's question about kind of how to teach our faculty to prepare them to teach the essential skill for the future. And then so this kind of like out kind of similar to what kind of Jonathan kind of idea kind of identify those kind of key skill students need to equip. And then so starting to plan, okay, if we want to teach certain skill, and then so how we can redesign the course curriculum to meeting that need. And then so it's kind of like based on different principle and a different program. And so starting to teach the future kind of like age how to teach specific skill, and then but not losing those kind of their expertise in their subject matter. And then so it's hard, and so especially kind of like when we try to teach about the creativity things in the lab format, and so it's hard to ask the scientists to be creative because they have to follow specific procedure to finish something. But how we can teach them beyond that is kind of like if we it's kind of like how we can make some learning activity more kind of like engaging and more creative to them to feel about it's not that hard to making the learning creativity. And then so it's kind of like a little bit more kind of need a lot of practice. And then so this is kind of something I'm still working on right now, but I do see this is something we have to helping our faculty or subject matter to prepare for the future.
There was a really great idea in the chat that I'd like to call attention to. Deborah Cook of Western Governors University suggested the idea of developing a core curriculum which includes entrepreneurship, agile project management, basic tech understanding like coding, AI, and machine learning, and opportunities for demonstration of both creative and critical thinking, a true maker environment, as she noted. And I just want to not only acknowledge that great idea, but use it as an opportunity to let you guys know that the ShapingEDU community neighborhood work is kicking off just after Labor Day, just in early September. And one of the neighborhoods, of course, is connecting education to the workforce of the future. And these neighborhoods have action-oriented charges to create, to build things that solve these challenges. And so I might suggest that the Connecting Education to the Workforce of the Future neighborhood thinks about what such a curriculum could look like. And Emily, you were starting to say something, so I want to pass it back over to you.
Yeah, I just was jumping in on that idea of like, how do we train faculty for, a curriculum that isn't as stringently subject matter expertise based, that it's a little bit more nebulous in terms of coaching and crafting creativity and maybe some of these softer skills. And, certainly that's a challenge because it's harder to assess for those types of learning outcomes because they're so individualized and different. And so then that kind of compounds the issue of classroom management and giving attention to where attention is needed, and how do you assess someone's progress or learning where the benchmarks will likely be very different, as opposed to if there is just a set sort of subject matter based curriculum. The facilitation and assessment of that is a bit more clear. So it gets muddled, I think. And it's harder to let go of that and to have conversations that, aren't based, student, teacher, subject matter expert, and the individual learning to just now it's a conversation of where are you and how can I help you get to where you need to be.
Well said. Thank you, Emily. And Deepti, I see that you raised your hand. Go right on ahead.
Yeah, so I think in the K-12 space, what really works for us is to have an experiential setup for the teachers. So whatever you want to get into the classrooms, it always works if you have a Saturday off with the teachers and you get them to experience the entire thing. So if you're talking about problem solving or critical thinking, give them scenarios wherein they can have a hands-on themselves. And what also worked very recently is we had a reading program. So reading program for children. But before that, we had a reading program which was done for the teachers. So entire 6 months, the works. I mean, whatever you would expect the students in your classroom to do, you would have the teachers do it. So the experiential learning really works.
Yes, thank you. I really, 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 really appreciate that feedback, Deepti. That's so important. Have the educators experience it first. I was reading this story that a friend had shared about an emergency trip to the pediatrician for someone's child, and the child received such great care and later inquired, hey, I'd like to change my next appointment to be with the same doctor. My daughter loved him, and it turned out that the person caring for my friend's daughter that day was not an actual practicing doctor, but actually an administrator. And it was as part of the workflow and the setup, the administrators had to go and do rounds and actually do what the doctors do, just so that they weren't too far away from the purpose and the mission, which I thought was a really fantastic idea. Jake, I see you have your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, I was thinking about the degree to which there are meta skills, so those human or foundational or soft skills, somebody pick a term so that I can stop saying all three, are also about doing in a way that even involves mimicry. So part of what prompted me to think about this right at the beginning, I was thinking about how there's one of the major disconnects, I think, between higher education and the real world or the workforce is simply in terms of how each communicates what skills are necessary or in demand. And the fact that people are listing degrees is evidence of a challenge around credentials, but the fact that people are listing specific skills related to a specific job, whereas in the higher education space, they're describing much more general principles, intentionally conveying learning to learn, so to speak, and then that creates a pretty substantial mismatch or gap. It's one of the major challenges that we have to address these days. So you can see that very literalized in terms of some of the work we do in terms of what's called crosswalks between different databases of skills. There's something called ONET, which is a US database. The Europeans have their own database. We up in Canada have our own, and we literally have to connect the way that we describe different skill sets because we use different terms to say the same thing. And I think amongst the greatest gaps is between higher education and the quote unquote real world or workforce. The other thing that I was remarking was how much, even online, one learns through imitation. So Emily, for instance, took off her jacket. I was like, oh, I'm warm too. I took off my jacket. And there is this massive degree of mimicry that even happens via video, which I think is often lost on faculty members who worry that if they aren't sages at the front of the stage, they're not fulfilling their duty as a faculty member.
That's a really great point. Our workforce needs evolving faster than the skills and expectations placed upon educators. There's all kinds of external pressures, some related, some unrelated, that adds to it.
Yeah, and there's this really funny conundrum, I guess, and for me, even in what people are talking about here in terms of that experiential side of things.
Very cute, right? So this has been turned over to a person who's capturing the content.
I'm so sorry. May I just ask whoever to mute themselves?
And of course,
whoever speaking.
Probably saw me come in and she saying, we're going to ignore her because we're just.
Let me see if I could find this so I can mute them.
So the danger with this many microphones.
What if?
We're good. I found it.
That experiential link, and I know for myself, it's only a couple of years ago I basically had to get out of the technical and sort of K-12 jobs that I had been in, and until then I'd never been in that position where I had to even invent my own job, if you know what I mean. And there's this massive kind of disconnect, I guess, where the people who are doing the preparing of students for this future generally, and it's at least in Australia, have more stable jobs, I guess. It's more of a full-time environment, much more sort of traditional kind of employment. Yeah, they're the ones preparing the students for the environment, which is totally different, the gig economy, etc., without having experienced that gig economy themselves. So there's definitely a disconnect there. I don't know exactly what the solution is there, but it ties into what you're talking about with that experiential. Even if that does mean bringing in more industry and merging the two. I know there's some schools here where I live in Brisbane where the school campus itself has, I'm talking about primary and high schools, where they host startup companies as part of the school. So it's great for the startups because they get, office space and Wi-Fi and everything, but the interactions that occur then, that's this sort of direct connection, and more of that maybe would be the solution for how to help in that area.
Thank you, Jonathan. And speaking of solutions, and Jake, I see you have your hand up. I'm just gonna move on to the next question because I see our time is sadly dwindling down. But speaking of solutions, Jonathan, I really do, since we've talked a lot about challenges and we've talked a lot about the environmental conditions, I really would love to take this opportunity to hear from you guys on what's working really well. Are there any exemplars out there, whether in your own environment or others that you've seen? I'd love for you to share about those. And those of you in the audience, please feel free to share any links or exemplars in the chat as well. Thank you. Does the conversation really go dark when it comes to solutions?
I'll jump in again. So I think one of the solutions is just people being aware, like where they're up to on the journey. So having conversations like this, for a start, is a big part of that solution. I'll put a link to one of the things I'm doing in my work in the chat, if that's okay. And that's basically like a self-assessment where you can go through and think of all the kind of meta skills that might help you be future ready. Where are you already up to? So I'll pop that in there. That's one way, I guess, to start thinking where am I on that journey, if that's useful. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
I think what also really helps is if we involve the students. So last 4 years, I have this platform that I have for student-led learning, and all decision making is done by the students. So it just gives another perspective, and it also lends to what they want. You actually get to work towards what they want in their future, involving them. So that also is a good idea, I think.
Love the idea of amplifying the student voice and making sure students have a seat at the table in making these decisions. Thank you for raising that point.
I might say, well, I just lost what I was going to say because I was thinking about how good that point was. So what's working? What are the exemplars? For me, it's having practitioners, people who are in it doing the work, but who are also coming outside of those environments and becoming consultants. And, not solely consultants, but someone who has been doing the work to come out and talk about what that looks like sort of down there in the trenches. So for me, that's been, very helpful, not just to approach the ideas or the challenges from, just the high level, maybe sort of like theory or academic level, but like in an everyday sort of fighting the battle kind of way.
So interestingly, I think I found a challenge as opposed to a solution, and I'd actually looked to our other panelists for the solution, because Jonathan pointed out that in Australia, there's a number, or maybe even the majority of faculty members who are relatively full-time, or who do have sort of solid jobs, so to speak. In Canada, that's certainly not the case. I'm a contract employee at McMaster, which is largely why I work at LinkedIn. It's not largely why, but it's one of the reasons why I work at LinkedIn. And I think that in most of the world, if I'm not incorrect, the majority of teachers are not as well compensated, I would argue, as their place in society, the importance that their role in society plays would suggest. And therefore, one of the solutions we need is to elevate the role of educators. And the dilemma that I see there is, if they're being elevated as educators, then they're not necessarily being elevated for their role in the real world. It's actually the gig economy teachers, the contract faculty members that are more often in the real world than the ones that are full-time. And so I don't exactly know how to strike that balance. For instance, I went to law school, and in Canada, law schools are unique amongst higher education within sort of the university system, in that they have a very large percentage, but also well-paid contract faculty members. And as a result, I do think you get a lot of great real-world experience from people who are sufficiently compensated that they're willing to both teach and practice. But that's a pretty unique experience. And I wonder if there are other examples that people have of teachers being elevated in that way.
That is a great example. And in fact, since we just have 10 minutes left now, and we've gotten through a lot of territory, I'd love to invite those of you in the audience, especially those who've been sharing ideas, suggestions, questions, to now feel free to raise your hands if you have a question or an idea that you want to share, whether it's something you want to ask of a panelist or just something you want to share yourself. Now would be a great time. No audience questions or ideas to share? No problem. We can keep moving right along. Some other ideas for solutions, whether it's something concrete, a framework, a model, a course, or something that already exists, or something purely hypothetical and aspirational that you'd like to see exist.
This is Yipeng. I can try to share something kind of like we have done in the past 3 years, and then we're starting one of the professional master program in the GIS and also web mapping programming, and it's a huge kind of highly kind of like pretty technical kind of program. And so this is kind of like a taught by one of kind of like well-known kind of like the pretty kind of like a highly kind of like academia kind of program, and then so they try to kind of like reach out different audience. So the way we're starting is kind of like try to forming one advisory board, and then inviting probably 6 to 7 industry leaders to helping us to crafting that kind of curriculum to make sure kind of everything kind of like align with probably the next 2 to 3 years need for from the skill set part, and also kind of and then after that kind of we turning every kind of as per kind of opinion back, and then to the internal kind of curriculum committee to see, okay, so what we can provide into them, and so and then if we don't if they cannot teach, and then who else can teach, and then so we kind of open the door again kind of just to see. It's kind of like a flipping around kind of in past and in the university. We only focusing on kind of what we can teach and then not what we should teach. And then so right now kind of we are opening the door and saying kind of if we want to teach this kind of skill, and then so if we don't have that kind of like a person, so how we can partnership with any kind of alumni who are already inside the industry, already doing that job for a couple of years, and then so we kind of inviting couple kind of alumni coming back to co-teach with us, kind of to helping them to kind of so helping students to know more about what is the life after they finish the program, and also have a chance to learn more about what is going on in the current kind of like workforce. And then so kind of we kind of try to revisit that curriculum every 2 years. So right now it's in another cycle, and then so we kind of try to doing that more frequently because the world changes so quick. And then so in the beginning, and then so we thought probably 2 years review is good enough, but right now we found probably 18 months, and then all the skill will be updated, will be dated. And then so it's kind of like how we can fasten the pace to iterate those kind of like the curriculum and then fit into the curriculum. And so you need more effort to align with the workforce and also those kind of subject matter experts in the industry.
What do you guys make of, there's a lot of news reports, research reports that come out that show that there's a gap between the skills that students graduate with and what the needs are of the workforce. It's no secret. It's one of the reasons that we're here talking about this today. But what about the other way around? There's been some threads about students shaping the future workforce. But what about, similar to what the World Economic Forum does, what if some higher education institutions banded together and came up with the list of skills that they believe the workforce should value based on what they're seeing and the talent being incubated within the university environment? Something to think about, flipping the script.
That's a cool idea. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. Why are we waiting for employers? And this is sort of the anti-capitalist in me coming out as well, but why are we letting money drive the priorities for our society when instead, hypothetically, you could have people think about what those priorities should be from a humane perspective, sort of stack rank them loosely and have them be entirely contextual from country to country or region to region or city to city, and then have educational institutions and governments and others really support those values first through education among other means. I think it's a fantastic idea.
Awesome. Well, between the ideas from the chat and the ideas generated by the panelists today, I feel like if we thought we didn't have solutions, we actually do. With the 6 minutes that we have left, I'd love to invite the panelists to just give some closing remarks, whether it's just highlighting something that they, the main takeaway that they want the audience to walk away with, or bringing up a new point that wasn't raised yet. Love to hear some final thoughts.
Yeah, I totally had some really inspiring moments just from reading the chat as well as listening to people. But obviously not everyone is seeing the chat. And there's some great ideas here with people agreeing around the idea of the student voice as being, one source for ideas and solutions. And it's this weird thing we hardly ever do in education, and maybe even in the workforce as well, actually ask the people, who are closest to the problem and give them, I guess, the empowerment. So that's been one of my favorite things that's coming out of that. Just that reminder to, just ask them. Yeah.
I'll extend that to say, in kind of going back into my classroom tomorrow, where I'll be faced with students again, just, internalizing a lot of what we talked about and what it means to kind of go back into that space, allowing the student voice, encouraging the student voice as just part of the regular facilitation of what always happens, but also in that space for myself, giving up control, if you will, or just the need for perceived control within that classroom, or to be that subject matter expert or that sage on the stage, and creating more of that roundtable environment for ongoing conversations, with reciprocal insight and feedback being shared. I've enjoyed the conversation so much today, and thank everybody for the points that they have added. It's certainly given me a lot to continue to think about.
Thank you.
I think summing it up, I think it's very important for us to understand that it's not always nice to point the finger at the teacher in the K-12 space to say, oh, you're not doing it right. I think providing them more experiential opportunities to be able to do what is expected, to have a more holistic sort of collaboration in the K-12 space, wherein they can sit and talk about what is required, where we are and where we need to go. And I think I've always said the student voice is important, and that is something which, so the summit that we do for the children, we make sure that the rubrics, the peer evaluation, the judgment, everything is done by the students. So that actually gets out what the children want. So experiential learning for the teachers, collaboration and student voice. And I think as adults and people who've already been there, done that in the education space, it's up to us to provide a platform, to provide them opportunities. So we have to ensure that there are enough opportunities for the children to explore and experiment of the skills that we're talking about. So that's it from me.
Thanks so much, Deepti, for that point, and also for getting up so early to join us today. Thank you.
On a more hopeful note, I mean, I am energized by the amount of focus on education from basically every sector. So to the extent that Sam was referring to an emphasis on skills gaps, whether it's LinkedIn or our parent company Microsoft, whether it's the largest governments on the planet or the largest corporations, there is no sector that isn't focused on education right now. And I think that actually presents all of us with an opportunity to seize this zeitgeist and perhaps put more resources or seek more resources to support education in its various forms, to support educators in their roles, and really to bring society together, perhaps to counter some of the more negative influences around populism, et cetera, via this uniting movement towards education.
Well said, and thank you so much for joining us, Jake.
Yep. So and the last one. So and then so I think I want to first I want to say thank you to everyone, and so it's so fruitful experience to me, and I learned so much. And then so I think I want to summarize what I try to talk about today. We have to tell students they can contribute to the future education, and then so it's if we enable them to having that mindset, and then so they can starting to express their need, and then so when we know more about their need, and then we can help in them more. And so this is probably as I say, when we empower them to having more choices, and so being a educator, we are so honored to working with them, to guiding them throughout the chaos for the next couple of years. Yep. Thank you.
Well said, and thank you so much for joining us. With the final minute we have, as you can see, poof, this wonderful art has appeared before our eyes that not only looks beautiful, but captures the conversations of today. And I would love to give the artist an opportunity to share any closing thoughts she has, especially given the outsider perspective. What are some of your biggest takeaways, Karina?
Oh, thanks, Sam. I think the thing that I'm most struck by is the energy of this group and how engaged everybody is for just being all across the world. Looking at the chat, I haven't been able to check closely, but every time I look up there, people are firing off questions and critical thinking and solutions. And it's so fantastic that you're all collaborating from across education and different sectors to work on this together. And I think it could be really neat in potentially future neighborhood meetings to see if you could ask some students to be a part of that and really start incorporating that energy and excitement around this student voice. And I think I love, this is a bias of mine, but I love the idea of storytelling, and obviously how you can creatively shift the ideas around storytelling to help create a shared vision together, including students, including industry, including teachers. I think all humans are drawn to that. So I'm really appreciative to be a part of this, and I'll keep coloring.
Excellent. Can I get an amen? That's beautifully said. And now your art is part of our story, and it helps us tell the story of events like this much better. So thank you so much. And I want to thank all the panelists and everyone for joining us today. It was a rich and vibrant discussion, and I can't wait to see what unfolds in the virtual Connecting Education to the Workforce of the Future neighborhood that kicks off in a couple short weeks. As I mentioned, the 2019 Unconference is taking place from March 12th to 13th in Tempe, Arizona. And you guessed it, there will be students in attendance. We're definitely going to try and involve students in some interesting and exciting ways. We'll be announcing soon also the September date for the next ShapingEDU Live episode. The next topic will be building constellations of innovation, and we actually already have some great panelists lined up from around the world. So that concludes today, and until next time, keep dreaming, doing, and driving. Thank you.